I wasn't supposed to hear it. I was supposed to be in my room with the door closed, like always. But I'd left my cup on the table and came back for it, quiet as a breath. That's when I heard her laugh, short, sharp, and say, "She's old, she won't notice." Then a clink of silverware, and my son muttering something I couldn't quite catch. I stood there, just out of view, fingers on the doorframe, heart suddenly very awake. I noticed. I always notice. I notice how Tina never looks me in the eye unless she wants something. I notice how my knitting basket disappeared from the living room last month. I notice how the mail doesn't come to me anymore. How my name isn't on the envelope even when the letter inside is from the Social Security office. I notice the way my own son, Brian, has learned to swallow silence like a pill. The next morning, I checked the top drawer of my dresser, the one lined with old flannel. It had been mine since I was a girl. That drawer once held my wedding veil, the hospital bracelet from when Brian was born, and the jewelry box my mother gave me when I turned 21. The box was there. The weight inside was not. At first, I thought maybe Tina had borrowed something. She'd done it before. A brooch, once, for a Christmas party. Didn't ask, just took it, wore it, and left it on the bathroom counter like a piece of cheap costume jewelry. That brooch was real silver. My mother gave it to me when I landed my first teaching job. I opened the box. Empty. No pearl earrings. No gold wedding band I kept after I started wearing Paul's on a chain. No blue topaz ring with the tiny chip on the side. Gone. All of it. I stood still for a long time, not crying, not even shaking. Just standing, like the air around me had thickened, and I was trying to remember how to move through it. Later that day, Tina asked if I could fold the kids' laundry, said she was so behind. She smiled with those straight white teeth and handed me a plastic basket like I was the help. I looked at her face. I wanted to say something, wanted to scream, but I didn't. Not yet. I just nodded and took the basket, carried it upstairs like a dutiful little ghost. That night I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan. It clicked with every rotation, and I counted the sounds like I used to count contractions when I was in labor with Brian. Tick, click, tick, click, tick, click. She said I wouldn't notice, but I notice everything. I notice how I have no key to this house, how they changed the Wi-Fi password and never told me, how Tina's mother gets invited over for brunches and cocktails, and I get asked to keep the kids busy upstairs. I notice how my son's eyes avoid mine every time Tina talks over me. I notice how I've become an accessory, a folding chair that gets tucked away when guests come over. The jewelry was just the loudest theft. The rest had been slow, quiet. Years of erasure stitched into daily life. And here's what else I noticed. The last time I saw the blue topaz ring, it was on the table beside my tea mug. I'd taken it off to do the dishes, like I always did. It was early April. The sun had come through the kitchen window just so, lighting the table like a memory. And now? Gone. As if that memory had been erased, too. But memories don't leave that easily, not mine. They're tucked into my skin, curled behind my ribs. I was a librarian for 32 years. I remember things, names, details, who said what and when. I started making notes, not in a notebook. Too risky. Just inside my head. The date. The last time I saw the brooch. The last time I wore the bracelet Paul bought me for our 40th anniversary. The way Tina's purse jingled that one afternoon when she came back from dropping off old clothes. And the way she looked at me when she thought I wasn't watching. Too smooth. Too practiced. They think age dulls you. That's their first mistake. It sharpens you. When your world shrinks to 4 walls and one TV channel, your attention gets honed. I know where every spoon goes in this house. I know the sound of each door hinge. I know when something's off. A week later, I called Dolores. She's 83, lives across the street, and still volunteers twice a week at the church thrift shop. She doesn't miss a thing either. I asked her gently if she'd seen any jewelry come through the shop recently. Something vintage? I said. Family pieces? She paused. Not here, she said. But I heard Millie mention Tina stopped by her cousin's pawn place, over in Maplewood. I said thank you. Then I sat very still. Pawn place. I'd never been in one. Paul hated them. Said it felt like buying someone else's sorrow. But now I wondered if my sorrow was sitting under a glass case with a price tag on it. So I made a plan. Nothing loud. Nothing rash. Just a quiet outing the next time Tina left me alone with the kids. She had yoga. Brian had a meeting. I was just home anyway. I packed a snack for the kids, turned on a movie, and asked the neighbour's daughter to watch them for an hour. Slipped out in my walking shoes with my old purse and a folded bus schedule. I didn't need to go far, just far enough to find what they thought I'd never miss. The pawn shop sat between a laundromat and a payday loan place, the kind of block that always smelled like hot grease and cold dust. The sign above the door was faded, just Maplewood Exchange in peeling gold paint. I stood outside for a moment, pretending to check my watch, like I wasn't scared to go in. Like I hadn't been called Mom and Sweetheart. So many times lately, I forgot what it felt like to be seen without condescension. The bell over the door jingled. It was the same sound as the one in our back door when Brian was little, running in from the yard to grab a juice box. I pushed that memory down and stepped inside. Cool air. Fluorescent lights. A man behind the glass counter glanced up but didn't smile. The place was tidy. Rows of watches, cameras, tangled gold chains laid out like forgotten offerings. I'm looking for some items, I said, voice firm, even. Sold here last week, possibly earlier. Jewelry, family pieces. He leaned forward, arms crossed. We don't keep things long unless they're high ticket. These were 1 ring, blue topaz, slight chip on the side, a silver brooch with mother of pearl, a gold chain with a small locket shaped like a heart. Something shifted in his eyes, not recognition exactly, but attention. You have ID? He asked. I pulled out my wallet, slid my driver's license across the glass. Louise Garrett. Okay. He typed something into his terminal. Hang on. He walked into the back. I waited, heart steady, hands clasped behind my back. My fingers grazed the edge of my coat pocket, where I'd tucked a tiny photo of me wearing that topaz ring. Paul had taken it in 1983 on our anniversary trip to Bar Harbor. When the man returned, he had a tray. He set it down gently. 3 items. My brooch, my ring, the locket. I almost gasped, but kept my face still. I'll need proof of ownership if you want them back, he said. I nodded. Do you have the seller's info? Standard record, he replied. Name, ID, date of sale. He turned the slip around. Christina Garrett, my daughter-in-law. Sold 3 days ago. Claimed it was her grandmother's estate. Provided ID. I'll need a copy of that, I said. He hesitated. I'm pressing charges, I added. That changed everything. 10 minutes later, I had copies. I thanked him and walked out slowly, like the air had thickened again. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. But the sidewalk seemed too bright under my feet. I had the proof now. She'd stolen from me, lied about it, sold the pieces for pennies, no doubt. Back home, the house felt different. I stepped inside, and the smell of cinnamon and fabric softener turned bitter in my throat. Tina was in the kitchen, on her phone, laughing. The kids were upstairs. Brian wasn't home yet. I looked at her, truly looked, and saw it clearly for the first time. The ease, the entitlement, the absolute certainty that I was invisible. "Can I help you?" she said, still scrolling. "No," I said, "but I'll be helping myself." She raised an eyebrow. I went upstairs, closed the door, and opened my lockbox. Inside were the originals: Paul's death certificate, our mortgage payoff letter, my bank info, and now the pawn slip. I placed it in the folder carefully. Then I picked up the phone and called someone I hadn't spoken to in 5 years. "Marvin?" I said when he answered. "Louise?" He sounded stunned. "Are you okay?" "Not yet," I said. "But I will be. I need a lawyer." He didn't ask why. Marvin had been Paul's friend since college, our taxman for decades. Trustworthy, quiet, thorough. "Come by tomorrow," he said. "Bring everything." That night, I didn't speak to anyone. I cooked dinner. I washed dishes. I kissed the kids goodnight. But I didn't speak. And Tina didn't notice. She didn't notice anything. Because I was old. Because I wouldn't notice. But I did. And tomorrow, so would she. Marvin still worked out of that small brick office on Glenwood, the one with the faded awning and the door that stuck unless you gave it a nudge with your hip. He met me outside when he saw me coming up the walkway, cane in one hand, manila folder in the other. "You didn't call just to catch up," he said. It wasn't a question. Inside, everything was the same. The scent of lemon polish, the dusty ficus by the window, the old clock that ticked half a beat too slow. He poured me tea without asking how I take it. Some friendships outlive silence. I laid the folder on the desk and opened it. He looked over the pawn slip, the seller's name, the ID copy. He read it twice. Then he looked up at me with the face of someone who has seen too much and is still surprised by new cruelty. "You want to file a report?" "I want to do more than that," I said. He nodded slowly, set the papers down, and leaned back. "We'll need to contact the police, make a statement. You'll have to sign an affidavit confirming ownership and value. They'll probably want photos, appraisals, if you have any." "I don't," I said. "But I have stories." That made him smile, faint and sad. "Sometimes stories are stronger than receipts." He picked up the phone, dialed slowly. I sat there, hands folded in my lap, heart steady. Not calm, not angry, just sure. That was the difference, I realized. For weeks, maybe months, I'd been treading water, waiting for something to shift, for someone to notice. I thought being good, being quiet, being useful would be enough to protect me. But it hadn't. Marvin scheduled a meeting with a detective, gave me the time, the address, and a copy of the paperwork I'd need to bring. As I stood to leave, he touched my hand gently. "She made a mistake," he said. "She thought your silence was weakness." "She's not the only one," I said. Outside, the wind had picked up. The sidewalk was scattered with brittle leaves, the first signs of fall. I paused and looked up at the sky, at the heavy stretch of cloud, and felt it. Not peace, not yet, but something close to it. I wasn't going back to that house to wait for permission. I wasn't going to keep explaining the same hurt to people who called it misunderstanding. When I returned, Tina wasn't home. Brian was in the garage, fiddling with tools, pretending they still gave him purpose. The children were at a birthday party. I went upstairs, packed a small bag, 3 changes of clothes, my medications. The framed photo of Paul from our trip to Rockport, wind in his hair, laughing like a boy. I wrote a note, just a few lines. "Brian, I love you, but love doesn't excuse silence. I'm not leaving because I'm angry. I'm leaving because I remember who I am. I left it on his pillow. Then I took my bag, my folder, and I walked out. No shouting, no slamming doors. Just the steady rhythm of my cane on the walkway and the sound of a woman reclaiming the sound of her own steps. I checked into a small inn off Route 17, run by an older couple who didn't ask questions, just offered tea and a clean bed. That night, I stared at the ceiling and breathed like I hadn't in months, like air was finally mine to keep. In the morning, I ironed my best blouse, brushed my hair, and went to the precinct. The officer who met me, Detective Sanders, listened carefully. He didn't interrupt, just nodded and took notes. When I finished, he looked at the copy of the pawn slip. She listed them as part of her inheritance? Yes. Are you prepared to press charges? I didn't hesitate. Yes. He leaned back. You'll need to come in to identify the items. We'll handle the rest. I nodded. Tina had taken from me, but I would take back what mattered most. Not the jewelry, my name, my voice, my place in the world. It's a strange thing to sit across from your own belongings like they're strangers. The items were laid out in evidence bags on a table, sterile, sealed, stripped of all memory, but still humming with ghosts. My brooch, the one with the tiny hairline crack near the clasp from the time it snagged on my sweater during a library fundraiser in '92. The ring with the topaz stone, pale and chipped at the edge. And the heart-shaped locket, gold warm as honey, now dulled by too many fingerprints that weren't mine. Detective Sanders watched me gently. Take your time, Mrs. Garrett. I don't need time, I said. I pointed one by one. That's mine, that too. And that locket, my husband gave me that in 1974. He hid it in the sugar canister. I found it on my birthday. Sanders nodded, scribbled. We'll process this. With your statement, the documentation, and the shop owner's cooperation, we can move forward. I signed what they asked. Steady hand, full name, Louise E. Garrett. The E stood for Elaine, my mother's name. She wore that brooch to her last church service, propped up in her wheelchair, lipstick perfect, eyes tired but proud. I wore it after she passed, wore it again when Paul proposed. That brooch had outlived 2 women already. It wasn't going to be discarded by a third. Back at the inn, I sat at the edge of the bed and dialed Marvin. It's done, I said. Charges filed? Yes. There was a pause. Are you okay? No, I said, but I will be. We made a plan. He would draft a letter informing Brian and Tina of the legal process. He'd attach the documentation, the pawn receipt, my signed affidavit. He would deliver it in person, just to be sure. They'll deny it, I said. They always do, he replied. I hung up, folded my hands in my lap, and waited for the ache. But it didn't come. What came instead was a kind of clarity. You can live in a house and still be homeless. That was what I'd felt for 2 years, in that beige 2-story with its air fresheners and its no shoes in the hallway signs and its subtle suffocations. I had been tolerated, but not welcomed. And now, finally, I was somewhere else. 2 nights later, my phone rang. Brian. I let it ring. 4 times. Then I picked up. Mom? His voice was low, tight. Did you go to the police? Yes. There was a long pause. You couldn't talk to us first? You never listened, I said softly. What would talking have changed? She didn't mean to. Sell my memories? Lie about inheritance? Sign her name under stolen goods? She thought they were just things. I sighed. You used to sit on my bed and play with that locket like it held treasure. He said nothing. Brian, I continued, if I had died and you had found those things gone, would you have known they were ever there? Still nothing. That's what she tried to erase, not the items, the proof that I had lived. I didn't know. No, I said. You didn't look. I ended the call. No anger, no yelling, just truth. The next day, a formal notice was delivered to their door. Tina was being investigated for theft and fraud. The case would proceed. I wouldn't withdraw the charges. Later, Marvin called. They're calling it elder financial abuse. Because I'm old, I said dryly. No, he said. Because you were exploited, and because you fought back. I thought of all the women I'd known, neighbours, cousins, friends from church, who'd lost more than jewellery, lost voice, agency, dignity, one quiet day at a time. I'd almost joined them. Almost. But then I remembered something I'd told a girl in my library once, a shy sixth grader being bullied. You teach people how to treat you. Well, lesson given. The day the official case number arrived, I sat at the breakfast table of the inn with a cinnamon bun and a lukewarm cup of coffee and felt nothing. No triumph. No relief. Just a quiet sort of balance. I had spent so many years trying not to make waves, trying to stay useful enough to be loved, silent enough to be kept. And now that I had finally raised my voice, it didn't sound like thunder. It sounded like a locked door clicking open. The innkeeper, Marla, paused to refill my coffee. She was a wiry woman with soft eyes and a faded tattoo on her wrist. Something floral, once bright, now just a blue blur. You've been sleeping better, she said. I looked up, surprised. She smiled. You don't snore as much when you're at peace. I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in weeks. That afternoon, Marvin called again. Tina had hired a lawyer. Brian hadn't. The lawyer wanted to discuss alternatives, which was a nice way of saying, can we sweep this under the rug if we say sorry and pay you off? No, I said. You're sure? Marvin asked. I'm not doing this for an apology. I'm doing it so she can't do it again. The next morning, I got a text. Brian again. Please call me. We need to talk. The kids miss you. No mention of what happened. No acknowledgement. Just the usual bait on a hook of guilt. I didn't reply. Instead, I walked to the public library down the block. It was smaller than the one I'd worked at, but the smell was the same. Paper and quiet and a touch of dust. I found the local paper and looked through the classifieds. Not for gossip, for housing. I was done living in places where I wasn't welcome. 2 hours later, I toured a small one-bedroom apartment. Second floor, creaky floors, south-facing windows. The rent was manageable. The landlord was a widow herself. Name was Jolene. She asked me 2 questions. Do you smoke? And do you pay on time? I said no and yes, and she handed me the key. Just like that. No references, no condescending smiles, no talk of, well, at your age. That night, I slept in a new bed, on a mattress that didn't remember Tina's perfume or Brian's weight on the stairs. I cooked myself a single egg in a pan that hadn't been touched by anyone else's hands. I made toast. I poured tea. And for the first time in over a year, I ate breakfast without noise, without tasks, without the heaviness of being in someone else's way. The apartment was quiet, yes, but not the bad kind. It was quiet, like freedom. The case moved forward, slowly, as these things do. Tina's lawyer made another offer. A settlement, hush money, really. Marvin forwarded it to me without comment. I didn't even read the whole thing. They could keep their offer. I had already reclaimed something more valuable than what she stole. My sense of self. A week later, I went to pick up the recovered jewelry from the police station. They handed it over in a simple plastic bag. No ceremony, no apology. But when I opened it, there it was. The locket, warm in my hand again. I pressed it to my chest, just for a moment. I didn't cry. I just whispered, "You're home." Not for the object, for me. The courtroom was small, not like on television. No marble columns or sweeping galleries. Just beige walls, tired chairs, and a judge who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Still, it was official. It was real. And it was happening. Tina sat to my left, across the aisle. She didn't look at me. Her hair was pulled tight, her suit one size too sharp for someone who used to wear leggings and call me Mama Lou like it was a joke. Her lawyer whispered something to her, and she nodded, lips pursed. Brian wasn't there. They'd said he might testify on her behalf, but he didn't show up. Whether out of guilt or cowardice, I didn't know. I tried not to care. When the clerk called my name, I stood slowly, cane in hand, folder tucked under my arm like a shield. They asked the usual questions. Was I of sound mind? Did I understand the charges? Did I confirm this was my property? I answered clearly, each word a stone placed carefully where it belonged. Then they asked me why I'd pressed charges. I took a breath. I was not confused, I said. I was not forgetful. I was not mistaken. Those pieces were mine, passed down by my mother and her mother before her. They are tied to moments I lived. The ring I wore when my son was born, the brooch I pinned on when my husband was buried, the locket that held his photo until my hands shook too much to open it anymore. The courtroom was still. I did not press charges out of revenge. I pressed them because if someone had broken into my home and stolen these things, you'd call it theft. But because it happened quietly, under my roof, by someone I loved, people hesitate. They say family, like it means immunity. I let my eyes fall on Tina, just for a second. But love is not a license to steal, and age is not permission to erase. The judge nodded. That was all. Outside the courthouse, I didn't wait. I didn't speak to her. I walked past her like she had once walked past my open hands on the banister, the ones I used to steady myself as I carried her children up the stairs for nap time. At the crosswalk, a young woman touched my arm. "I hope you win," she said quietly. I nodded, unsure how to respond. But when I turned to cross, I felt taller than I had in years. That evening, I opened the jewelry box again, not to wear anything, just to see it all home, each piece back in place, restored. But not the same. Nothing was the same. The house was gone, the family fractured, the silence broken. I was alone, yes, but I was whole. The next day, I returned a call from Dolores. She'd heard the news, somehow. Small towns always do. "I'm proud of you," she said. "I don't feel proud," I admitted. "No, you feel awake. That's harder." We talked for 20 minutes. About the past, about her knees, about a woman she knew in the next town whose son had emptied her savings without ever asking. She said nothing, Dolores told me. Didn't want to cause trouble. I was quiet. That's the line they give us. Don't cause trouble. Don't rock the boat. Be grateful. Be quiet. But quiet almost cost me everything. Not again. That night, I lit a candle. Not for anyone else, just for me. And as the flame flickered, I whispered one promise into the stillness. They will never mistake me for invisible again. The trial wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no confessions, no slamming fists or tearful breakdowns, just paperwork, process, and the low, grinding sound of justice inching forward. And yet, every minute inside that courtroom felt like reclaiming a square inch of ground I'd been forced to surrender long ago. When the judge ruled in my favor, it was quiet. No gavel, no fanfare. Just a sentence. The property in question is confirmed as belonging to Mrs. Louise Garrett. Restitution is recommended. Criminal charges to proceed. Tina didn't look at me. She gathered her bag, stood, and walked out. Not a word, not even a glance. And Brian? I didn't expect him anymore. That's what people don't understand. It's not the theft that wounds deepest. It's the silence that follows it, the absence of remorse, the echo of a relationship you realize was hollow far longer than you wanted to admit. The following days were strange, still, like the moment after a storm when the wind dies and the air holds its breath. I wasn't angry. I wasn't grieving. I was just adjusting to the weight of my own name again. One morning, I went to the post office to pick up a package. The clerk handed me a parcel wrapped in brown paper with no return address. Inside, a scarf, one I'd knitted years ago for Tina. Soft wool, pale green. She used to wrap it twice around her neck and say it made her feel classy. There was no note. I folded it neatly and placed it in the back of my closet. I didn't need it anymore. My new apartment became a kind of cocoon. Small, sunlit in the afternoon, filled with the quiet sounds I chose. I hung old photographs on the walls, Paul holding Brian as a baby, my mother in her Sunday best, a candid of me at 42, standing on the porch with a watering can and no idea how much I'd survive. I bought herbs and lined them on the windowsill. Basil, thyme, mint. The mint thrived. I started writing again, just small things, notes, memories, lists of what I'd lost and what I had refused to lose. One day, I walked to the community centre. They had a flyer posted: Seniors Resource Meeting, Legal Protection, Estate Planning, Housing Rights. I sat in the back, listened. The speaker, a woman maybe in her 60s, bold red glasses, voice like warm steel, talked about elder fraud, about the growing number of older adults being financially manipulated, pressured, erased. Every statistic felt like a bruise I'd almost forgotten. At the end, she opened the floor. I stood. My daughter-in-law sold my jewelry, I said, calmly. Told my son I was too old to notice. I noticed. I pressed charges. I got it back. Silence, then applause. Not loud, not theatrical, just enough to tell me I wasn't alone. Afterward, the woman approached me. Would you share your story next time? She asked. We need more voices like yours. I said I'd think about it. That night, I sat by my window, sipping tea. The city breathed below me, alive and distant. I looked at the herb pots, the photo of Paul, the worn book I'd started rereading. And I realized something. I wasn't waiting for anything anymore. Not for forgiveness, not for an apology, not for a phone call that might never come. I wasn't on pause. I was beginning. Her name was Janine, the woman with the red glasses from the seniors' meeting. She called me a few days later, voice brisk but warm, like a woman who'd seen too much to bother with pleasantries and yet still believed in kindness. I meant what I said, she told me. Your story matters. We host a monthly session, informal, just 10, 12 people, but it makes a difference. I hesitated, not because I didn't want to share, but because I wasn't sure I could. I'm not a speaker, I said. You're a survivor, she replied. That's better. So the following Thursday I went, brought nothing but a notepad and my cane. I wore my grey cardigan and the brooch, the real one, mine. The room was small, plain. Folding chairs, a water jug, some store-bought cookies. But the air was heavy with something I recognized. Experience. Pain that had been folded neatly and tucked into purses for years. Eyes that had seen children grow cold and partners disappear. Hands that had written checks and packed lunches and still been told, later, they hadn't done enough. Janine opened the session, then gestured to me. I stood. "My name is Louise," I said. "I'm 78 years old, and last month I filed a police report against my daughter-in-law for stealing my jewelry." That got their attention. I told them everything, not dramatically, not as a victim, just as a woman who had once believed that being quiet meant being safe. Heads nodded. Hands clutched tissues. One woman whispered. Mine took my savings. Afterwards, a man with a cane and a faded military jacket came up to me. "My nephew sold my car," he said. "Told me it was junk. Got $3,000 for it. I didn't even know until the neighbor mentioned it was gone." I touched his hand. "You're not crazy. You're not alone." That was the beginning. Over the next few weeks, I spoke more, helped write resource guides, answered questions. Once, I even went with a woman named Barbara to meet with her lawyer, just so she wouldn't sit in the waiting room alone. I wasn't trying to start anything, but something had already started in me. One morning, Janine called again. "You ever think about writing it down?" "What?" "Your story. Not just for meetings, for others. For the ones too scared to speak." I thought about that all day. That night, I opened a fresh notebook and wrote 4 words at the top of the first page. She said I wouldn't notice. And then I wrote everything. Every detail. Every quiet betrayal. Every moment I almost swallowed myself whole. I didn't stop for hours. By the time I closed the notebook, my tea was cold. My hands ached. But something had settled in my chest. Peace, maybe. Or purpose. I slept deeply that night. In the morning, I made mint tea and watched the sun stretch across the windowsill. The mint had grown wild, spilling over the edges of the pot. I pinched off a leaf, crushed it between my fingers. That scent. That life. It wasn't over. It had just begun to speak. 2 weeks later, I got a letter. Not a call, not a text. A letter. Handwritten, folded unevenly, slipped into a plain envelope with no return address. But I knew the handwriting. A mother always does. Brian. The ink was smudged in places, as if he'd pressed too hard or gone back over words he wasn't sure about. "Mum, I don't know how to start this. I don't know what I'm supposed to say that could make anything better. I should have stopped her. I should have said something. I should have seen it coming, but I didn't. And now you hate me." I read that line twice. Hate him? I folded the letter on my lap and stared out the window for a moment. No, I didn't hate him, but I couldn't excuse him either. I opened the letter again. She said you'd never know. She said it wasn't a big deal, that you'd never wear that stuff again anyway. And I believed her because it was easier than asking myself why she thought it was okay. I let her convince me you wouldn't notice. But you did. And now I don't know who I am anymore. That part stayed with me, because for a long time I hadn't known who I was either. Not in their house. Not with her rules. Not with my own name spoken like it was a burden. I finished reading the letter. He apologized. Not just once. Many times. He didn't ask for forgiveness. Just said he wanted me to know he was sorry. And then one line at the end. "I miss the sound of your spoon stirring your tea in the morning. The little things. I notice them now." I folded the letter neatly and placed it in the drawer with my old photographs. I didn't call him. I didn't write back. Not yet. But I kept the letter. Because even small things, when honest, are worth keeping. Later that day, Janine stopped by. She had keys now, to my building, to the resource office, to the print room where we were compiling a booklet of elder legal rights. She brought me a scone and a new notepad. "We're putting your piece in next month's issue," she said. "I never said yes," I teased. "You didn't say no." That was true. She sat across from me, took a bite of her scone, and said, "You're not the only one who's noticed. Since your talk, we've had 5 women come forward with cases. 2 opened investigations. 1 moved out of her daughter's basement and into senior housing with her own lease." I didn't say anything, because pride isn't always loud. Sometimes it just sits beside you, warm and heavy, like a blanket that finally fits. That night, I took out the jewelry box again, opened it. The pieces still lay in their soft beds of velvet and flannel, untouched since the trial. But this time, I didn't close the lid. I slipped the topaz ring on my finger. It was a little snug. Arthritis had changed things, but it still fit. I wore it to bed, not to show anyone, just for me, because I had noticed, because I had spoken, because I had stayed standing. And that ring, it wasn't just a stone. It was a promise kept. It was a Tuesday when the officer called. Detective Sanders, his voice as even as always. "We've concluded the investigation," he said. "There's enough evidence. The DA's office will proceed with formal charges against Christina Garrett. We'll notify you of the court date." I thanked him and hung up. Then I stood at my kitchen counter, my hand resting on the teapot, unmoving. So it was real. She would be charged, not just questioned, not just warned, charged. And I didn't feel vindicated. Not really. What I felt was the heavy truth that justice is not always graceful. Sometimes it limps forward like an old woman with a cane, deliberate and slow, but unrelenting. Later that day, I walked to the little park behind the community centre, sat on the bench by the duck pond, the one shaded by that crooked elm that looked like it had spent its whole life leaning away from something. A little boy ran past me, chasing a paper airplane. His grandmother, maybe, shuffled behind him with a juice box and a tired smile. She nodded at me. I nodded back. That was all. That was enough. Sometimes we recognize each other without a word. Sometimes we carry the same kind of weight in our hips, our eyes, our history. Back home, I poured tea and thought about what it meant to be done, to see the legal part through, to hear the gavel, to receive the paperwork, to walk away. But there's no clean ending to betrayal. There's only distance and choice. I had made mine. That night, I opened a new page in my notebook. I didn't title it, just wrote. Justice doesn't always look like a courtroom. Sometimes it looks like a woman sleeping through the night without flinching when a door closes. I closed the notebook and turned off the light. The next morning, I found a small envelope taped to my front door. Inside, a drawing. Crayon, scribbled, colourful. A house with smoke curling from the chimney and a crooked sun in the corner. In the yard, a woman with grey hair and a cane. Above her, in shaky letters, "I love you, Grandma." No name, but I knew, and it broke me. Not in the way pain breaks you, in the way memory does, in the way regret trickles in through the smallest cracks when you think you've finally sealed the door. I pressed the drawing to my chest and sat down on the hallway floor, tea forgotten on the stove. They had used me, yes, but the children hadn't. They were too young to understand the erosion, too innocent to draw the lines between love and obligation, silence and erasure. And now one of them had remembered me, not as a ghost, as Grandma. I didn't know what to do with that. So I did what I always do. I folded the paper, gently, and placed it in the same drawer as Brian's letter, not as forgiveness, as memory, Because memory, when honest, is its own kind of justice. A week before the court date, I received a message from Marvin. Short. Simple. Tina wants to meet. I stared at the screen for a long time. Not because I didn't expect it, but because part of me had always known this moment would come. The final attempt. The last performance. I waited 2 days before answering. Tell her I'll meet her. 1 hour. Public place. My terms. Marvin arranged it. A Wednesday afternoon at the cafe near the library. The one with the mismatched chairs and chipped mugs. I arrived early. I always do. Habit from a life spent waiting on others, watching clocks. I chose a seat by the window, ordered mint tea. No sugar. She arrived 5 minutes late, of course. Wearing beige. Too much perfume. Sunglasses she didn't take off, even inside. "Louise?" she said. I didn't respond, just gestured to the chair across from me. She sat. The silence between us stretched long and thin. Finally, she said, "This is all gotten out of hand." I raised an eyebrow. "I never meant to." "You did." She blinked. "I didn't think—" "You didn't care." She leaned forward, voice tight. "They want to prosecute. Do you understand what that means? I could lose everything." I took a slow sip of tea. "You already did." Her lips tightened. "I said I was sorry," she snapped. "No," I said. "You wrote it wasn't a big deal." "That's not the same." She exhaled, long and theatrical. "Look," I panicked. "We were behind on bills. I thought those things weren't important to you anymore. You never wore them." I stared at her. "Do you know why I stopped wearing them?" I asked. She didn't answer. "Because I didn't feel safe. Because one day I opened a drawer and my things were gone. Because I lived in your house like a shadow, and shadows don't wear jewelry." Her hands clenched in her lap. "Brian begged me to come. He thought—" "Brian is not here," I interrupted. "This isn't about Brian anymore. This is about you. And me. And the fact that you stole from me, lied to me, and tried to make me feel senile when I noticed." She looked away. I watched her for a moment. She wasn't crying. Not really. Just waiting for the right moment to pivot. "Please," she said finally. "Don't go through with this. Think of the kids." "I am," I said. She blinked. "What?" "I am thinking of the kids, of the example it sets if I stay silent, of the kind of women they might grow up to be. I'm thinking of what it means to let someone take and take and take without ever being told. Enough." She didn't speak, so I stood. "You said I wouldn't notice," I said softly. "But I did. And now everyone else does too." I left the cafe without looking back. Back in my apartment, I sat by the window, the mug still warm in my hands, the city humming just beyond the glass. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. Sometimes she just shows up on time, tells the truth, and walks away without flinching. The courtroom looked the same, but I didn't. I sat straighter this time, my blouse freshly pressed, my cane resting beside me like a quiet witness. The brooch pinned to my collar was not just an accessory, it was a declaration. Tina entered with her attorney, her face drawn, lips pale. No sunglasses now, no perfume. Just the sharp edges of a woman who had run out of angles. The charges were red: theft, misrepresentation, elder exploitation. She pled not guilty. Her attorney stood, tried to explain. She didn't understand the ownership. She believed the items were abandoned. "My client regrets any distress this has caused." I didn't react. Regret is cheap when it comes without change. The judge nodded, made notes, and scheduled the next hearing. As we stood to leave, Tina looked at me, Not bold, not defiant, just tired. "I never thought you'd take it this far," she murmured. I met her gaze and said, "That's because you never thought I mattered." She opened her mouth to reply, but I turned away before she could. That evening, I received a voicemail. "Brian." "Hi, Mum. I heard what happened today. I I guess I just want to say I'm sorry. I know it's late. I know it doesn't fix anything. But I thought maybe—" I stopped the message. I didn't delete it. But I didn't finish it either. I needed silence more than I needed closure. Later, I walked down to the community center. They were hosting a small event. Potluck, music, paper lanterns strung between trees like soft memories glowing in the dusk. Janine waved me over, a plate in one hand, a clipboard in the other. "Everyone wants to talk to you," she said, grinning. I smiled back. "Let them." One woman approached, clutching a cup of punch and a folded pamphlet. "You're Louise, right?" she asked. "Yes." She looked nervous. "I'm trying to leave my daughter's house. It's hard." I touched her arm. "I know." She took a breath like she hadn't in weeks. "Your story gave me courage." That night, back in my apartment, I wrote a new page in my notebook. It's not about the jewelry. It never was. It's about dignity, memory, the right to still own the narrative of your life. I placed the notebook on my nightstand, and for the first time in years, I slept without locking the bedroom door. The case didn't go to trial. It settled quietly through a plea agreement. Tina would not serve time, but she was issued a formal conviction of misdemeanor theft and ordered to complete a restorative justice program and pay restitution. The amount didn't matter to me. Money was never the point. It was the acknowledgement, the line in ink, the record that said, "Yes, this happened. Yes, it mattered. Yes, she did it." I was sitting on my balcony when Marvin called with the final paperwork. It was a cool morning, breeze moving the mint leaves in soft waves. The city below was waking up slow, and I let it. "You did it," Marvin said. "No," I said. I remembered who I was. We hung up. I sat a while longer. Across the street, a mother was walking her little girl to school. The girl skipped ahead, backpack bouncing, hair in pigtails. The mother trailed behind, looking tired. I used to be both of them. A daughter once, skipping, carefree. A mother later, tired but determined. And now I was just myself. Not someone's burden, not someone's invisible help. Just Louise Garrett, on the third floor with her herbs and her tea and her story. That afternoon, I went through my things, not to organize, just to touch. I pulled out old letters Paul had written me, back when men still sent love by mail. I found Brian's kindergarten drawing of our family, where I had triangle hair and the biggest smile. I paused at the jewelry box. The locket lay on top. I opened it. Inside, Paul's photo, still slightly faded. On the other side, a tiny scrap of paper I had added myself. It read, "You are still here." Because I was. The apartment was quiet as the light shifted toward evening. I pulled on a shawl and went to the community center for Thursday tea. Janine was already there, setting out mismatched cups. Helen waved me over. She always made room at the corner table. The talk was light, old shows, grandkids, the price of bread. But underneath it all was something heavier, something shared. A woman next to me, Elaine I think her name was, said suddenly, "My son told me I was lucky he let me stay." The table went silent. Then I said, "Mine told me I wouldn't notice when they took what was mine." Elaine looked at me, eyes wide. "What did you do?" "I remembered," I said. And then I acted. She nodded, not fast, but with weight. When I got home that night, there was a message from Brian, not a voicemail this time. A letter slipped under my door. Mum, you don't have to respond. I just wanted you to know we're moving. Tina's going to stay with her sister for a while. The kids ask about you. I told them you're doing something important. I think they understand. I do too. I was a coward. I let her make you small in your own life. I don't expect forgiveness, but I'll keep writing, even if you never write back. I folded the letter and placed it with the first. Because maybe forgiveness isn't a door. Maybe it's a window, one you open a little at a time. And some days, just knowing it's there is enough. The last time I wore the topaz ring outside was a Tuesday. Nothing special. I didn't dress up. I didn't have anywhere important to go. I just wore it because I wanted to. Because it still fit. Because I could. No one asked about it. No one needed to. I wasn't wearing it for anyone else. It sparkled in the light of the community centre window as I poured tea, and Helen said, "That's a nice ring," like she'd never seen it before. I smiled. It was always mine. I just forgot for a while. The truth is, I didn't file charges to punish Tina. I didn't speak up to ruin anything. I did it because silence had nearly cost me everything. People think justice is loud. Courtrooms, news stories, handcuffs. But sometimes it's a woman signing her name slowly, legibly, because she wants the record to be clear. Sometimes it's sitting alone in a quiet apartment and feeling at peace. Sometimes it's a drawer full of letters, a crayon drawing, a locket, and no more apologies whispered into pillows at night. Tina never came back, and Brian, well, he still writes. I still don't answer. Not yet. Maybe someday. But not because I've forgotten. Because I remembered too much to let it happen again. And now, this little home I made, it's nothing grand. 1 bedroom, creaky windows, mint that grows too fast. But every drawer opens to my hand. Every corner carries only my shadow. Every sound is mine to notice. If you're reading this, and you've been made to feel like your years made you less, not more, if you've been called forgetful, irrelevant, in the way, if they thought they could take from you because you'd be too tired to fight, then hear this. You are not invisible. You are not used up. And you damn well do notice. They called it old age. But I call it memory. And memory? She has a long spine and sharp teeth when you wake her. So if this story stirred something in you, something fierce, something tired, something that's been sitting in your chest for far too long, then let this be your first step back to yourself. Speak, write, act. And if you can't yet, then subscribe to Grandma True Stories. Because here we don't whisper. We remember, we record, and we restore. Loud or quiet, late or early, justice always arrives. And when she does, she wears pearls, walks with a cane, and never once looks back.